Now let's bring in Klaus. Larres is a professor of history and international affairs at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Professor, how worried are you about a risk of escalation at this point?
I'm very much worried about it. I think everyone is worried about an escalating war which encapsulates the entire region. Hopefully that will not happen, but Iran's attacks on countries' civilian targets, like in Kuwait and and the other targets you just reported about in Dubai, the airport in Dubai and Kuwait, that doesn't look very promising that a wider war can be avoided. It also doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense for Iran to antagonize its potential allies and supporters in the region, because all these Arab countries have advised the Trump administration not to get involved in a war on Iran, and they actually have refused overflight rights to the United States. And Iran is now kind of pushing them almost to the side of the United States. And I can only conclude the reason why is because Iran wants to widen the war, to drive oil prices up, to make it really turn it into economic chaos in order to put pressure on the United States and Israel to then finish the war kind of quickly.
Was the United States ever interested in a diplomatic solution or in diplomacy with Iran? Was there anything Iran could have said in negotiations in Geneva that would have averted this strike?
That is difficult to know. Trump has said that he wanted to hear the words from Iran that they will never, ever want to have nuclear
Well, they've
weapons.
said that. They've said that.
Exactly. In fact, they'd said that several times, despite the opposite claim of President Trump. So it's very difficult to know whether anything the Iranians could have done and offered in negotiations would have pacified Trump and Israel. My feeling is that regime change eventually came onto the table after the protests in December and January in Iran, in Tehran above all, which were brutally suppressed by the Iranian regime. 30,000 protesters seem to have been killed. And I think that turned the table for Trump and possibly Israel as well. And that made them decide that regime change was what they wanted, and no other solution was acceptable. But I don't know for sure. I think it's a big question.
Yeah, and if this conflict drags on, what are the potential global consequences from oil markets to commercial aviation and really broader geopolitical alignments? We already live in a very, very divided, polarized world. This could make things even worse.
Absolutely. You know, the economic consequences of the war, of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the oil prices will escalate, inflation will definitely escalate, stock markets will probably collapse or at least significantly go down. But my suspicion is that Trump doesn't want to have a war which goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks, that after a couple of days, he may want to call it quits. He wants to take out the senior leaders, all of the senior leaders, or as many as he can get, and then hope that the population of Iran does the job for him, that they rise up and they replace the regime. Because as we know, he has not planned to put any ground troops into Iran, and I don't think Israel has planned that. And to topple a regime, to really have regime change just by airstrikes will be extremely difficult unless the population does the job for him. And that is probably what he hopes. So I can see that after a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days at most, that the war will cease from the American point of view. And of course, when we look at America's domestic opinion and the MAGA movement, the Trump supporters, they don't want to get involved in a prolonged war in the Middle East. So Trump has to take that into consideration. Of course, we have an election year, though the midterm elections are only in November. It's March now, or almost March now. Then, you know, people forget. 6 months is a long time, or longer than 6 months is a long time before the election. So I don't think that the Iran war, unless it goes on and on and on, will actually have that much of an impact on the midterm elections in the United States.
All right, Professor, thank you so much.